Well, I tell you what, kicking off with the first, and I guess the most obvious question the fans are going to have. Obviously, I think there's a lot of people out there who are very disappointed to see the series not get renewed, and also a bit surprised by that decision in various ways. Given the fact this is the first time you're talking since then, how do you feel about that, and how do you feel particularly about the fan reaction?
Well, I'll start with the first question. How do I feel about it? I think surprised was the first one. I mean, our numbers were pretty strong. We knew if you read Joe's blog, if anybody reads Joe's blog, he sort of intimately went through the economics and politics behind that decision. And that's something that we were aware of from day one. We knew that our show was in a different position than a show that was owned by a network, and that puts you in a more vulnerable position. So we knew that. We knew that if anybody was ever to go, it would most likely be us first. That said, we were surprised. Yeah, we were as surprised as I think the fans were. The network had given us a fair amount of support in that previous year. The numbers were pretty good. There was one little soft lull in the middle of season 3 for about 3 episodes, and then it came back really strong. And so I think we were surprised. That's the first thing. The second thing is, disappointed, really disappointed. I love this show. I love this character. I've been in the industry for a little while now, and the industry will continue on, and work will continue on, and the mortgages will get paid, and food will be on the table. I'm not particularly worried about that. But it's rare that you find a show that's this special, where the fans get it, where I was really proud to be a part of this show and what this show stood for. I found it was a very restrained show when it came to the amount of sex and violence that normally you see on television. That I get it, the more sex, the more breasts, the more violence and decapitations, the more audience members you're going to get. Joe, that just wasn't his thing. He didn't want to make that show. And I've got young kids, and I was proud to be on a show where I felt like that was fairly restrained. Yeah, sure, there was violence, but it was more 18 kind of violence than it was real violence in any sort of, especially given what we're used to seeing these days on television. So I think, very disappointed that this really special time of my life had come to an end, where I could no longer tell this this sort of sensitive character story in a way that I found to be almost a throwback to simpler times in a way. So that. And the second question about the fan reaction, heartwarming, I think. It was really kind of fun to watch, and surprising, to be honest, both. We hadn't created a strong social media presence. There was no concerted effort. There wasn't anybody really behind it all to say, okay guys, we're gonna in the story, we're gonna craft a social media presence like Way Hot, say, in Winona Earp, where you can tell that they created those characters so that when they put them together, they would have a really cool hashtag. And good on them for doing that, because that's I don't mean to say that in a way that's pejorative. It's not. But our show wasn't that. It didn't think about social media. So consequently, our interactions with social media and the fans were a lot more limited. And so when the show was canceled, and all of a sudden everyone starts coming out of the woodwork, where if we had been more assiduous from the beginning, we would have realized they were there from the beginning. I don't think we realized that it was as impactful as it was on as many people. And the letters and the stories that people told were really touching. I mean, there were tears in my eyes when I read a bunch of them. And you forget, I think. You forget with the kids and the agents and the mortgages and trying to find the next job and all that stuff. You forget why you're doing it. And I think the fans really reminded us all of why we do it. And we know to say the words, you know, in cons and in interviews. We know to say the words, but we forget sometimes the reality behind those words, that storytelling is the most powerful way for humans to learn and contextualize their lives. And when you're lucky enough to be in a show where it really is just about the characters, and that was something that, yeah, it was beautiful. Those sort of 2 months where we were doing those save the show things was really, I don't think anybody really ever thought that, hey, listen, we're going to do this. We're going to save this show. We hoped. I mean, hope is one thing, but a logical realization that, hey, listen, you know, if they said no, they said no, right? I think it was a different expression. It was an expression of togetherness, an expression of love for what we have all created together, and I mean the fans included. You know, it's not just, you know, we're clearly not in space. It's not reality. The story doesn't get finished until the fans finish it and go along that ride with us and interpret the story in a way that is probably deeper than it was written, and that's art. That's the whole point, where you put it out there and you put out an unfinished piece, no matter what it is, whether it's a novel or a painting. You put out an unfinished piece, and it's your context and everybody's individual context that sees what we put out there and sees their own ending and their own completion. And that's what that 2 months was about. It was about that completion and acknowledging that completion for everybody. It was beautiful. It's sad. Sad that it's over.
Do you have any particular scenes or aspects of your character that you enjoyed the most? I mean, something you can elaborate on, something that really stood out for you?
Yeah. What I loved most about 3 was his impulse wasn't always to do the right thing first. And I found him complex that way. Sometimes it was, but frequently it was pretty muddled about what the right thing was. And it you know, the signals weren't always so clear in 3's brain about how to do things right. And in the end, he got there, and I found that to be a lot like my lived experience, because it isn't. I mean, yeah, fine, you know the rules of life, but the truth is, life's messy. You know, like, it's not always easy to follow the rules of life, even though you know them. You know, you have the angel on one side, and then you've got the little other angel or devil or whatever on the other side. But that's just reality, because life is never neat. Life is almost never anything but kind of complex and messy. And I found that to be the most redeeming aspect of his character, that he felt to me like a real character who you didn't know whether he was going to do the right thing, but fundamentally you could kind of count on him in the end to be there. Yeah, I felt like, yeah, I felt an identification with that character, because he didn't have a superhero either, I think, a superpower, and that was also one of his big strengths. The fact that he lost every fight he was ever in, the fact that he, you know, wasn't sort of half robot and wasn't really good at anything, to be honest. He didn't have a strength other than just getting back up off the mat and living life and being there for his friends. And that felt to me like, yeah, I can identify with that, because most people don't have anything that they're the best at, whether it's, you know, school or running or hockey, or like, that's me. That's everybody. That's like that's all my friends. That's my kids. That's like, I don't know any Olympians, you know, like I'm 3. We're all kind of 3. And that part, I felt kind of honored to play that character in a show where not everybody, but a lot of characters had their superpowers. You know, 5 was like always able to solve everything mechanically, and it was really cool, which is great and it's awesome, except, you know, most people aren't like that. And, you know, 6 might have been the only other character, except he had a really strong moral center that was, you know, that guided him through very clearly. So decisions were never really all that hard for him. So it kind of felt like 3 was the messiest, most average of the lot, and those are the most fun to play.
Talking about the rest of the cast, obviously, I think there was a great chemistry on screen. Can Can you talk a little bit about what was so special about getting the chance to work with some of those other wonderful people?
Yeah, that's part of what made this show special, and what I mourn when I think about it not being part of my life. It's interesting. We weren't buds. We didn't go out drinking together. We didn't go out clubbing. None of us are really like that. It's not so much our thing. A couple, but most no. I would say that we're a whole hell of a lot like family, like your extended family that you see at Christmas and New Year's, and you respect and like and care for and are happy to see. But we all had our other lives, and we all lived our other lives, and when we finished work, we went home. It wasn't like we were like, oh my God, we're the best of friends. It wasn't that, and I think I respected that and needed that in my life. They were colleagues. They were an extended family, and I know the way this works in the industry. It's not gone. You've got cons and whatever, but it's basically gone. It's like summer camp. When you stop going to summer camp, you don't see the people anymore. You care about them, but it was nice to come back to that set, and that extends beyond the actors on the show. The crew had been together for a long time. The crew was together during the Lost Girl years. So for them, I don't think Jay, our producer at Prodigy, has got another show lined up in that studio, which means it's the first time in 8 or 9 years that these guys will not be working together. And that's rare in our industry. When you get to work with someone for that long, you develop a shorthand, and it's a comfort level. So yeah, lots to be missed.
I think looking to what might have been, obviously fans have their own feelings about the direction the show would have gone in, or things they would have liked to have seen.
Yeah.
I guess two questions. First of all, was there a clear vision in terms of what the show was going to become had it been given the chance to keep going? And on the other side, were there things that you would have liked to have seen given that chance? Yeah,
there was a clear vision. Joe from the very beginning told us he had a 5-season arc, and they had already, this is how surprised they were. I mean, they had already they'd started writing season 4. They had, the writing room had begun in June. They were paid to do that by Jay, who was fairly confident we were going to get a season 4. So yeah, there was a clear vision. There was a 5-year story, and we didn't know it because he didn't ever tell us. We would experience it a little bit like the fans would experience it, except a little bit ahead, in the sense that it would be parsed out sort of script by script, even though he knew where our characters were going. And every once in a while there would be things that changed, like Sarah wasn't supposed to be around. She wasn't supposed to be as big a character as she was. The android revolution, that was pretty clear that was coming for season 4, or at least in the future. That was always there, except this character of Sarah wasn't. So Sarah ended up being, I guess 2 probably would have played a bit of that role as sort of a part human, part augmented human, or created human. But in a way, Sarah is the perfect person for that conflict, to be on both sides of that, to be at once Bosnian and Serb, and to be both of those in the context of a civil war where the Bosnians are beaten up on the Serbs and vice versa, and she's like, which side do I pick, and do I have to pick a side? And the truth is, in those conflicts, you always have to pick a side. You don't get the luxury to say, I'm both, it's okay, then they'll both shoot you. So it would have been really interesting to see that dynamic play out. And Joe's thinks a lot about life, and he's very well read and very well educated, and I would have loved to hear him discuss that on television and in the context of a really fun kick-ass space show. It would have been fun to be able to do that. So I know that Joe will probably find a way to give closure to the audience, to the fans. He'll probably figure that one out, whether it's in a comic book or something like that, or through his blog, or God knows. But he, for however hard this was on me, it was triply or quadruply so on Joe. This was a project that I think meant more to him than almost any other project he's been involved in. So it was hard. hard. And then I think in his mind there's probably a small hope that he'll be able to finish this off with a miniseries somewhere. It's above my pay grade. It's not something that I can really affect change on, so I try to say, all right, it's over, and move on until that phone call comes.
I mean, in a bittersweet way, is it at least kind of nice to know that you've joined the very luminous ranks of shows within this genre cancelled before their time? Because it's a weird badge of honour for the shows, particularly in this genre.
Yeah, I guess it remains to be seen whether we've really joined that. That's not something that I have any control over. Yeah, I mean, if it grows into something that people feel like, my God, it was canceled before its time, and it becomes a thing, it becomes like a Firefly thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a huge honor. I can't. It's not something that I can speak to at this point in time because it's not something I can control, and nor do I have any sense of whether or not that would be the case. I know that the fans, the context of the way the show ended can't help but leave a certain taste in people's mouths, and we'll see how that reverberates forward.
Do you think that sort of Canada and the creative film industry gets enough props for the amazing strides they've put forward in sci-fi? I mean, you're talking about Lost Girl. You also have things like Continuum. Obviously, well known is a lot of these shows are crossing over.
Killjoys and Arrow, and I mean, like to be honest, half the shows that you're here for shoot in Canada, and they are some version of Canadian content. Whether a show like Arrow is more what we would call a service production in the sense that it shoots in Canada, but there's a lot of American influence on that show in terms of its creation. So. Whereas a show like Dark Matter or Winona Earp, or those two specifically are very Canadian. Lost Girl as well. Killjoys is a bit of a hybrid, but again, mostly Canadian. The Expanse is more in the Arrow thing, but that's shot in Canada. So, yeah, Canada has developed a really interesting niche. I think now it's because of expertise, because there is. A strong set of skills to make sci-fi television, and I think in the beginning it probably started because it was cheap. And sci-fi is a genre where you can make Doctor Who, and it's a massive, popular show, but you look at it and you're like, it's kind of cheap, But people are like, we don't care about that because it's always about the story, and it's always about the characters, and about thinking about what society would be like in certain sets of new parameters. And so fine, you can have a robot, and even now that Doctor Who's probably got more money, the robots still kind of look, it's not Hollywood, right? And so I think that's probably why Canada, because we were cheap, is why we started off in this genre. But it's no longer why we're continuing in this genre. It's because the expertise is there. And Canada, in various different ways, has spent a lot of money developing their CGI capabilities. There's some really strong companies that on big LA shoots will come to Canada, and it's not tax credits. They come there because that's Montreal. It's where some of the best post-graphics guys are in the world. And that was a concerted effort by, in that case, the provincial government 15 years ago. And so you're starting to see the fruits of that bear out now. Plus, we sound like Americans. So they're like, hey, no one in Idaho will know that we shot this thing in Canada. They'll all think that we shot it in America and spent twice as much on our television shows. But we didn't, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, looking to the future, I know, like you said, there's obviously uncertainty in things that you can't control.
Yeah.
But are there other projects, other things that you're looking at? Are there things that we should be excited about?
The short answer is yes. I have a wonderful arc on Blind Spot, which is a show on NBC. I'm not sure how many of you guys get it or don't here, but that's coming up in season 3. So that was really cool. New York, shooting in Morocco. The character's a fun character and a little like 3 when it comes down to it. He's sort of a bit of a rogue. A bit of a charming rogue kind of guy. Doesn't have the doesn't have the, he's not a series regular, so he doesn't have the full complexity that 3 has. But very fun character to play, great arc, and that's coming up for those of you who have access to season 3 of Blind Spot. And in terms of the next series regular gig, yeah, that search has just begun. I was holding out hope, kind of, and I didn't even audition or take those things until maybe about a month and a half ago. So Canada's a bit smaller of an industry. You need to be a little more patient. It's not like there's 100 things filming there at the same time, and you finish one series regularly and you're like, all right, great, where's the next one? It doesn't. That's not the Canadian industry. So time will tell, but for sure it's something that I'm putting out there, and part of it's the vision as well. Part of it's saying, okay, like when I moved from Montreal to Toronto, I told my agent, I want a show that is, and I described 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it was like a list of 10 things, and it was dark matter, and the character was 3, literally, and it didn't even exist at the time that I said to my agent, this is what I want. So for me, it's been a process of understanding what I want. I got to make that list, and I don't know what it was because this was what I wanted, and when you get what you want, I want more. Like, you can't say that. There isn't another show like this. So I do believe very strongly in the power of, I don't know, call it visioning if you want. I don't mean it to sound flaky, but in order to achieve something in life, you got to know what you're walking towards. And so, a couple months to sort of rethink and reimagine what it is you really want for the next stage is totally fine, and that's kind of where I am right now. So we'll see. I don't know what it is that I want next, other than Dark Matter season 4.
Well, I think we all want that. Before we get back to fans here today, do you have a message for all, particularly the Dark Matter fans watching this all around the world?
Oh, just a big thank you for coming on this ride with us. It has been an honor to meet many of you at conventions. It's been a whole lot of fun playing this character and describing this world with you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Perfect.